Yes, I will be moving Doug the Flatulent in, and then hitting you with foul gases. Come, Eric, let us show them our blades. Ha ha!
Join the team.
Hey, theMCGuiREView, and today we're going to be talking about this is not a new miniatures tabletop game, but it is very new to me. I've just discovered it, and I cannot stop playing. This is going to be a little bit of a review video, but when it comes to MoonStone, and that is the game that we're going to be talking about today, MoonStone from Goblin King Games, what we're going to do is we're going to look at an overview of the game. I'm really going to get into talking about the mechanics of the game, what makes the game so good, what makes the game so fun. I'm not going to do any playthroughs today here in this particular video. We will talk about gameplay in the video, but we'll do more stuff in the future. Don't worry to get into actual gameplay of the game. But one of the things that I found interesting about this particular game when I went to just like anybody, go to the internet, try to find videos on the game, how to play. There's a ton of how to plays out there, battle reports. So if you're interested, like to full scale see a game be played, there's tons of videos and content out there on that. What I wanted to do was something between kind of just the high level unboxing and overview and the full scale gameplay. What I wanted to do was actually talk through the game mechanics, why it's so cool, why I think this is one of the best tabletop squad-based miniature games that I have played. I've played a lot of them. This is definitely one of the best. They've done a really, really good job with the design and the execution of this game, and I want to talk through that. All right, if you're new to tabletop miniature combat games, you're not going to get everything that's on the table here, obviously, with the game. All these little trees and these little terrains and the maps and the buildings, these are all things that are mine. You can use whatever you want for terrain. The standard play size for this game is 3 foot by 3 foot. Although you don't have to use a 3 foot by 3 foot mat. You just need to make sure if you use a smaller space, you kind of scale some things. Because when you play these games, you will kind of start by moving in so many inches from the edge that you start on. So you just need to kind of scale that a little bit if you're going to play on a smaller scale mat. So this is not 3 by 3, it's close. But that's going to be kind of the standard size of play, which is nice because then you're going to have kind of a smaller setup, a smaller board. It isn't like you need an entire table to be able to play this game. I'll also say what makes this one fairly unique is it is designed to be a 2 to 4 player tabletop miniature game. So a lot of these games like this where you have a squad of models, those models work together in cohesive ways, it's generally 2-player, you versus an opponent. This one is very interesting because it is designed to work for the 3 to 4 player game as well, which adds a whole nother layer of fun to a game like this. What you're going to see here on the table is a lot of the stuff that comes from one of their starter sets. Now they have a couple different base 2-player starter sets, and then they have a ton of models and expansions and things that you can buy. Expansions, what I mean by that is other models to add to your crew, your troop there. You can, do different combinations. There are 4 different factions in this game right now. The ones we're going to focus on in this video are the 2 that I primarily have, which is Dominion and Commonwealth. And quite frankly, I think I like those 2 factions the best out of the 4, although the other factions are really cool. The 2 other ones, there's kind of like a nature, kind of forest-based one, which I do really like. There's some really, really cool characters in that one. And then there's kind of like an undead type faction. But we've got the Commonwealth and the Dominion. The Dominion is like goblins and trolls and things like that. There's humans as well. And then Commonwealth is humans and gnomes. So I absolutely love the theme of the game and the different characters that you get. When you think about these models, and you'll start to see some stuff here side by side, Cam. Bear do that work for us. You start to see in these models a lot of this like Jim Henson type feel, right? Like Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, things like that when you see these characters and these models. And that's one of the things that really reached out and appealed to me first, was I saw the artwork and the character models, and I'm like, okay, that looks really cool. I love the sculpt and the model on that. And then the character names and the abilities. There's just so much they've done there that draws you into every single one of these models, and every single model has this huge character of its own, which I think they've done a fantastic job with that. Really, really well done. So that's really what drew me in. And then once I started to sit down and demo the game and play the game, I demoed it recently at a small conference, then it was like, oh my god, like, they've really done something cool here. Not only are the mechanics in this game very strong and very unique, but the gameplay is very, I would say, easy and extremely streamlined, where most of the time these types of games, even though they seem simple and it's like, you got 4 to 6 models and that's your crew, there's just books and books of rules. And, you'll have 4 or 5 pages on how line of sight works, all that kind of stuff if you do play these types of games. Where this one, it doesn't have all that. It's got very clean, very crisp, streamlined rules, and the entry barrier is extremely low. You can learn how to play this game in about 10 minutes, and after a couple games, you'll start to kind of master the synergies and the way that the game works. And it's just, you'll pick it up that quick. It's very, very simple. So we'll get into that a little bit more here when we get into the mechanics and the gameplay. We'll go through some of the components and things. Again, everything that's out on the table doesn't come with the starter kit. I'll explain what does and what does not. So let's go right there first. You're going to get 4 models from each one of those factions. So depending on which starter set you buy, again, this is the Commonwealth and Dominion starter set, you're going to get 4 Commonwealth and 4 Dominion models. Now, a normal standard 2-on-2 game, each player would have 6 models, but you can definitely play with the 4-on-4 right out of the box. It goes for a little bit of shorter games. You can kind of get all the rules and burn through a few games with just the 4-on-4. As you add players, you will scale back the amount of models that you have on the table. As you add 3 players, each crew will have a little bit less. 4 players, each crew will only have 3 models. So that just, it doesn't necessarily make the game any shorter, right? The games will go for about an hour and a half or so, unless that's a standard kind of 6-on-6. But it may make it a little bit easier, again, for that entry point, if you want to introduce more people to the game and run a 4-player game. Each character is only going to have 3 models. That way they only have to worry about 3 models' abilities. They don't have a lot of abilities. And the abilities, I think, make sense. They're pretty clean and streamlined. It's not like super advanced, complex things. And again, it just goes for the whole design that I think they created here. Everything is very intuitive and streamlined. And it just works in a way that makes the games incredibly fun. Okay? So you're going to get those models. The models are going to come with their character cards. You will want to put the character cards in a sleeve. I put mine in, I sleeved them and then I put them in a hard case sleeve. And the reason is because you're going to use a little dry erase and mark off their health. There's also little things you mark off on the card, like one, some characters can only do something once in a game, or they can only do it until they pay energy to refresh it, so you'll kind of mark that off just to be able to track it. But it's primarily for the health, just to mark off the health there. That's what you'll do. And again, this does not come with the starter set. This is mine. I use that to mark it off. And then when you're done, you can just, like this one's red, you can just wipe it right off, and you're ready to go. That's how it's going to work. You're going to get some reference cards here. It's going to go over kind of the turn order. It's going to go over the actions that you can take. We'll talk about that. You're going to get one of these really cool little markers that show a 4-inch, a 2-inch, a 3-inch, and a 1-inch. This is really handy. They do sell these separately as well, or you can just use a ruler. I do both, depends on kind of what the situation is. But this works really well to just be able to stick it down and just be like, okay, 2 inches, okay, that's how far I can move. That's how far I want to move. And you can just use this little thing here to measure your movement. You're going to get the rule book. This is the full rule book that you will get in the starter set, and you'll say, wow, that looks kind of small, like a little tiny pamphlet. Yep, that's how straightforward the game is. And then you may say, if you're a veteran type player of these games, oh, well, that's not going to work for me. I need the 50-page book of rules. That's the only way it's going to be a good game. I think you're going to be surprised that they're able to just use a simple rule set and achieve very big strategic and tactical gameplay. You're going to get, and one thing I'll also call out is a lot of times in these starter sets you get the beginner rules, and then you have to buy the books. We're going to hit the books here in a second. I have both of them. There's 2 books they've released. You have to buy the books to get the full advanced rule set. Not the case. This is 100% every single rule to the game, the whole game. There is no advanced version and entry version. Those are the rules. If you buy the book, the exact same rules are in this book. The only difference is you get campaign stories, you get the character art, all the character cards so you can see what every character does, and you also get flavor text. So you get a bunch of stories in there, like little mini stories about the characters. Love it, because what that does is as you read that, now you know who the character is, you know the character's backstory. And for someone like me that also really enjoys RPGs, I love the fact that I now understand the backstory of these characters, where they came from, who are they kind of friends with in their crew, why are they together. It just adds more flavor and feel when you play the game. It does for me. I think it's a lot cooler. You'll then get 2 decks of cards, starter deck. One of them is going to be your arcane deck. This is it. That's all it is. I did sleeve them. You'll want to do that. You shuffle the heck out of these cards. And then the other is the melee deck. Okay, so you get that. You get the arcane and the melee deck. Those are essentially the 2 ways that you attack in this game. If you attack up close, it's melee. If you attack at range, it's called arcane. Doesn't matter if you're shooting or you're doing magic. It's all called arcane if it's at range. So close attack, far away attack. That's how that works. You're going to get 2 little tiny black D6. You're going to roll these only at the beginning of the game. A lot of these types of games, you will be chucking dice every time you want to attack. Most tabletop miniature games, that's how they work. You've got a pool of dice, and you're constantly like, okay, did I hit? Do your armor to my this, do my... And you just roll. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's a lot of games I do like that are like that. But you're just, you're back and forth rolling to see if you even hit. That game streamlines, this game streamlines all this. The only times you're ever going to roll these dice is at the very beginning of the game. Each player rolls the die, and highest roll then will choose either something called early bird or initiative. If you choose early bird, you get to start placing your you're the first one to place a model somewhere, and then the other person's then initiative. And they get to place a model. Then you play. And when that's all done, whoever has initiative actually gets to choose, well, I want to go first, or I'm going to let you go first. And then that's that way for the rest of the game. Whoever has initiative for the rest of the game. And you will roll off round to round, but the person who has initiative will get a bonus to that roll. So they can kind of continue to possibly make the decision if they want to go first or second for that round. Okay? And I like the mechanic of how that works as well. That's a little bit different than I've seen in some other games. There are only 4 rounds to the game as well, so I'll hit that real quick right now too. You're only going to do 4 rounds of gameplay, and a round is everybody's gone. Every character is taken, let's just say, their action, their move. Every character's done their thing. Then that's a round once that's done, and then you'll go to the second round. And the third and the fourth. You're going to get a little bag of energy chits. That's that little blue bag up there. These are my dice. You're not going to get these. And then you're also going to get these blue crystalline looking dice, which I think are nice little dice for the starter set. They look pretty cool. And these are the MoonStones. And this is what makes this game and the mechanic in this game, I think, really fun. And then you're not going to get this. I custom made this, but you are going to get a little deck box that is made of this where it stores your cards, but obviously after you sleeve them, and again, you'll want to do that because you're just shuffling them like crazy. I custom made this. I cut out the little deck box, and I just custom made myself a little MoonStone deck box, which I thought was pretty cool, which I used to store my cards there. I'd love to see MoonStone release a little deck box. That'd be kind of cool, but I made my own custom one because they don't actually offer one yet. All right, and that's a starter set. So you get everything you need to play in the starter set. I think it's priced pretty well for what you get, and you get everything that you need. You get 8 full-scale models. You know, you get the full rules. You get everything that you need to play, including the little measuring stick there. So I think the value there is for that starter kit, 100%. And then everything else you see here, right, is you're going to have to come up with your own little battle mat and terrain. And if you play RPGs, you're going to have all this stuff. If you play other tabletop games, you're going to have all this stuff. If you don't, it's not too expensive to pick up a few little things. You don't have to overdo it, right? Just get yourself a little cheap, battle mat. Just get something paper, right? And you can just use rocks and, whatever. I mean, it's use whatever you have to kind of make your board and make your terrain. You just want to provide the models things that are going to give them cover, things that are going to be obstacles they're going to need to move around. That's really all you're trying to achieve. Now let's go to the Moonstones, because this is what makes this game incredibly cool. I have got my own custom Moonstones. That's these little things that you see here. I use these to represent the Moonstones just to kind of flavor up the game a little bit. But really, the Moonstone is this little die right here. I just put these on the board, and I'll move them out of the way if it gets in the way of gameplay. Because to be able to get to a Moonstone and acquire it, and that's really the goal of this game, you have to be your base has to be touching that Moonstone. So how do the Moonstones get on the board? When you start the game, one of the players is going to hold the Moonstones in their hand, 12 to 16 inches above the center of the board, palm down. You're going to hold all 7 Moonstones, they're D4s, 7 D4s in your hand, and you're just going to drop them. And once that player does that, and they're going to scatter all over the board, and that's where the Moonstones will be. The other player can say, okay, I want a mulligan. I don't like how that spread worked. There's more of them on your side. You're going to easily win because there's more of them on your side. Okay, then the other person gets to drop them. And then that person says, okay, mulligan or not. But then after that, once they're dropped, they stay where they stay. So you got to be careful there. Don't call that mulligan unless it's something that's like really not good for you. But what that represents is a lot of these types of games have something called like victory points, or points on the board that you're trying to control, like control points that are various different things on the board, where it's like get there, control it for so long, or get there and defend it, kind of stuff. Where this game utilizes the Moonstones, and I love the fact that there isn't specific points where it's like, okay, for this scenario, for this map, it's like the point is here, the point is here, the point is here, and you know that as players. The point that you're trying to get to is random every single game because you're just dropping those dice and it's just going on the board in different spots. And that's where the Moonstone is. And it's a cool mechanic because they used a D4. The 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the die, that's going to fall in different ways, obviously. And whatever number it's on, like the number that's at the top of a D4, that's how far the Moonstone is buried in the earth. So, the story, I'm not going to get deep into the story, but the story is these Moonstones fall down into this world, and these characters go out at night trying to collect the Moonstones to then sell them to these wizards in this tower for big, big money. So as these Moonstones are, coming down like meteors, right? They're hitting the ground and they're going so far down into the ground, either level 1, 2, 3, or 4. And when your character gets to them, your base has to be touching the die, not my little representation of the Moonstone, but the die. Then you have to dig them up. So you have to spend actions to dig them up. So obviously a Moonstone that's at depth 4 is going to take the characters longer to be able to dig up. to acquire the Moonstone and then try to hold on to it until the end of the game. And that's where the win condition of this game comes in. At the end of the 4th round, whoever has acquired and is holding the most Moonstones is the winner. It's not a last person standing. Obviously, if you eliminate all of your opponent's models before the end of the 4th round, you're going to win. But let's say all the models are still up. Let's say you only have one model that's survived and the whole other team on the other side is still alive. If you have more Moonstones, you are the winner. Now, there is no limit to how many Moonstones a character can carry. And after they do start to carry a Moonstone, they do become encumbered. So instead of their standard little 4-inch, and again, we're not going to get hardcore into gameplay here, but one of the actions you can take is called a jog, and it's for free, and it moves you 4 inches. Once you pick up a Moonstone, that's limited to 2 inches. So there is this trade-off over the course of those 4 rounds of, well, do I want to drop the Moonstone so then I can move faster and like take care of people and then go back and pick up the Moonstone? Will I have time to pick up the Moonstone again? Do I want to pick up these Moonstones earlier in the game, but then I've limited like multiple characters from being able to move their full distance, and now I got to move slower and be more strategic in where I go and how I position myself? Is the enemy going to get too many Moonstones before I do? Should I just go straight into combat and go that route? So that's what's so cool about this, is that you're not just combating other models around the board. You're doing that, and you're strategically thinking about, how do I dig up and acquire these Moonstones that have fallen and buried themselves in the earth, and be able to have those and have the most of them by the end of the 4th round. If it is a tie at the end of the 4th round, there will be a sudden death 5th round, and then it will be the end of the game. If it's still tied after that, it is a tie. But usually in that 5th round, something will happen, because when a character kills another character, if they're carrying a Moonstone, they just drop their Moonstones. And then it's game over. As long as that other character has enough actions to actually harvest and pick the Moonstone back up. Whenever a Moonstone's dropped from another player, it just drops at level 1. So it's basically just sitting on top of the earth. It hasn't, it's not buried like it would have been. So that's really the mechanic that I think is awesome with this game, is the Moonstones, right? And just the whole story, the whole concept is incredible. Let's go over some of the actions you can do when it's your turn. So when you do get a turn, you're going to activate only one of your models. It is a game where it's like, I activate one, you activate one, I activate one, you activate one. You can choose any model you want to activate. You can also save some of your energy. Every model will have a different amount of energy. You can use all that energy on that model's turn if you want to, or you can use some of it and save some. There is a benefit to saving it. It's mainly from a defense reactionary kind of perspective. Like if it's not your turn and you get attacked, you can use energy to kind of move a little bit out of range of that character's melee, or their ranged attack, or you can use extra energy when it's not your turn to do something called Go For It, which has to do with melee combat. If you get into melee combat and you're being attacked, you can pay an energy to get a couple extra melee cards to help your chances of defending yourself. So you can use that energy both in your turn and out of your turn, and it is very strategic in most cases to save a little bit of it for that defense. So let's look at our actions. And we can do each of these a number of times, except for jog. Jog you can only do once, and you can do these in any order. So I'm just going to read down the card here. Jog is your once per turn. It doesn't cost any energy. It's a free move. It'll move you 4 inches. Or to move you 2 if you're encumbered with a Moonstone. You can step. That only moves you 1 inch. There's no restrictions, which means you may have to do some things with stepping or various different things as you move through different types of terrains. You can traverse. That costs you 2 energy. It's pretty simple. Traverse is like you got to go through not a water. You step through water. But if you need to go through an obstacle, like let's say Grub here was standing down by this obstacle and for some reason wanted to move directly over it, Grub would have to spend 2 of his action points, or 2 of his energy, it's called energy in this game, to get to the other side of that obstacle, and you just would be within 1 inch from the base of that obstacle. And it's that simple. And any terrain you've got to traverse, unless it's like a barrier, it's something larger. You wouldn't traverse a tree, but you would traverse, fences and, things like that would be on the board. Okay. You can harvest. That is digging up the moonstones. It costs 1 energy. Each harvest will reduce the moonstone depth by 1. Okay, so you may do that multiple times when it's your turn to really be digging it up. You can't be engaged when you harvest the moonstone, so it means you can't have another enemy model engaged with you with like melee type combat. You can do an active ability, so all the characters have abilities on their cards. It's not overloaded like most games. They've got some passive abilities. They've got some arcane abilities, which is kind of their ranged attacks, or some magical abilities are in there as well. And then they do have some melee type abilities, and those are just laid out on the card, and every character is completely different. Some characters have kind of a balance of those. Some characters have primarily a bunch of passives that are just always active, and then maybe just one that takes from the arcane deck. It's like kind of a special ability. And they all have different health as well. You can do your arcane and melee attacks are the last ones. The arcane abilities activate by going to the arcane deck. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And the melee is going to use the melee deck. And the melee costs always 1 action to do a melee attack. The arcane abilities will take different amounts of energy. And usually it's 1 to 3, 3 being really on the high side, that it would take to do an arcane ability, but that would be a very powerful ability that character would have. And that's how that is going to work. Here on the other side, playing a turn, you got a replenish step, which means you basically just replenish the energy that you still have. You do your activation, and then your discard step, which is remove any unused energy tokens that you haven't used for that round. Okay, another thing to understand is every character will start the game with a certain amount of energy. But what's interesting is as you lose health, there's like little dots on the bottom of these cards. And as you cross them out, some of the dots are blue. And if you cross out a blue one, and you're going to cross out from right to left, that's how that works. As you cross out a blue one, it means on the next turn, you are not going to have as much energy. So it kind of represents as you take damage, you start to lose your ability to do certain things. You start to lose energy over time. And that I like that mechanic, because then it kind of strategically sets up, well, if you know what your opponent's characters do, you may want to attack specific opponents first, because they lose energy kind of early on. Because these blue dots, and you'd see from the side-by-side cam, they're in different orders. Some characters start to lose energy right away. Some characters don't lose energy for a while, and some characters kind of lose energy sporadically and kind of equally throughout their health. Most characters kind of have that 6, 7 health. Some of them only have 4 or 5, and that's offset generally by their abilities. Like if they have generally lower health and they're a smaller model, then they probably pack a pretty big punch. Most of the larger models they have a ton of health. And that's another thing that's really cool about this game. I don't have any of those larger models right now, like the giants and the trolls and whatnot. On most games, there is a point system where, okay, you can have 6 models, but sometimes you might only have 3 models because you have 3 big models, and that kind of uses up your pool of points. This game doesn't work that way. You have 6 models. It doesn't matter if you have 6 trolls that are this big, or you have 6 tiny little gnome. Well, this isn't a gnome, but tiny little models like this that would be like a gnome. It doesn't matter. And it still is perfectly balanced, which is really cool. It just, every model is different and does different things. Like a troll may have, or a giant may have a ton of health, but move very slowly and be like a huge target. They don't get any evading when they're being attacked from range. They may not even have a big like range on their melee, just a standard 2-inch versus like a 3-inch, which would be a larger range from a melee perspective. Doug the Flatulent has got this big pike that he carries where he's got a 3-inch melee range. That's important because if you're combating a model that has a 1 or 2-inch melee range, well, they can't reach you. So you're just going, all they can do is defend. They can't attack you. When you do combat in this game, it is kind of a simultaneous thing. So let's go right into that. Let's start with our ranged or arcane attacks or challenges. Any type of arcane that you're going to do on your cards where it's like, hey, you're looking for blue cards. These cards are colored and they just got Roman numerals on them. They're colored pink, blue, and green. And then they have the Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3. You're also going to have a catastrophe card. And you're going to be able to play that against your opponent and cause a catastrophe for them. So let me show you how unique this game is, because all of the combat is card-based. Remember, we said it wasn't dice-based. It's card-based. Now, there are a couple other mainstream games out there. They're not as big as they used to be, but still out there, quite popular, that are similar from the perspective of they use decks of cards to do the combat versus using the traditional dice chucking kind of mechanic. This one uses these decks of cards. You may think, well, it's kind of like maybe this other game I know, but I'm going to tell you, nope, it's not. They really came up with something unique here on this. You'll see these decks are fairly small. What's going to happen is when it's, and I'm not going to go over the rule here because the amount of cards may be different. When you are the attacker or the person who's trying to do an ability, you're going to get a set number of cards based on what it says on your character card here. It's going to tell you arcane. It's going to have a number, and that's how many cards you get. And there might be some modifiers based on that ability that would be on your card. Your opponent is always going to get 6 of these arcane cards. They're always going to get 6, and your deck may be modified as well based on their evade score. So they'll have a little evade. Every character has an evade score, which means that's how it kind of they can kind of move a little bit, right? So the attacker's deck is going to be modified a little bit. The defender is always going to get 6 of these arcane cards. And then what you're going to do is once you get your cards, the attacker is going to say, okay, you're going to know what kind of card you need. It's going to say right on your card, I need blue cards, or I need blue 1s, or blue 2s, or blue 3s. It's going to tell you exactly what you need. You're going to look at your hand and you're going to say, well, I got a blue 2, right? It's right here. I got a blue 2. I'm going to play a blue 2. And you're going to put it down. You're not going to show your opponent. But the thing is, let's say you didn't have a blue 2 and you need a blue 2. There's a bluffing mechanic with this part of the combat. You can tell the truth that you have the blue 2, that's what you're looking for, or you can lie and say you have a blue 2, but really all you had was a bunch of pink and green cards, so you just pull a green 1 out of your hand and say, okay, I got a blue 2. And your opponent now has to say, I either believe you or don't. So there's this awesome like bluffing mechanic that happens there that really adds a lot of tension to the combat, because you're like, okay, well, do I just take the damage and believe them and they really do have the card? Because if you call them on the bluff and it's wrong, like they were telling the truth and they really had the blue 2, and you say, nope, I don't think you do, and they pull it over, I now can go again. I get to attack for free again within this single combat action, because I was telling the truth and you said I lied. Now, if it's the other way around and I had a catastrophe card in my hand where I put it down and I did bluff, I did the green 1 and I said I got a blue 2, and they said you're bluffing. Oh, I don't. I had a green 1. I was bluffing. Now, if they have one of those catastrophe cards in their hand, they can give you the catastrophe. They can replace this card with whatever they want from their hand. But if they had a catastrophe card, they definitely would want to replace it with a catastrophe. And then every character under that ability they're trying to execute has a catastrophe penalty. So then you have to read your card and say, oh, well, I was trying to move my model 6 inches directly to you and then attack, but because I bluffed and you called me on it, then the resisting player places this model anywhere within 6 inches. That's my. So now it's like the other player can take my model and put it anywhere they want within 6 inches from where I was and totally hose me for the next 2 turns. So, and then there's some that like you just take damage or you lose energy. So you have to take this catastrophe. That's how ranged and magic abilities in this game work. It's that way for all of that. You go through this little like, my hand versus your hand little bluffing mechanic. And it plays out really quick. So don't think it's like, oh, that's really going to slow things down. I'd rather just chuck some dice. No. It plays out very quickly. The cards are very kind of, it's always kind of the standard same amount you'll get used to, like how many cards you have and what you'll need. It plays out very quick, and it adds a ton of fun to the game. It's a very, very fun mechanic that's part of the game. Because you can only imagine when you're bluffing and you get away with it, like how awesome that feels, or when you call somebody's bluff and it really, really matters, and then you nail them on it and they get a catastrophe and it makes a difference of the game, like winning or losing. It's just a phenomenal design and mechanic. Now, Melee works similar. Same thing, you're going to look at the values. How many melee cards do I get? How many melee cards do you get? There's some modifiers that may happen based on the abilities that you have. And then each person gets melee cards. Melee cards are completely different than the arcane cards. These are full-scale cards, and it's like you go through this little actual combat. And this is what probably is going to appeal to most people. Generally, for these types of games, you are just going to chuck dice, and you're just going to you might both be taking damage potentially, but you're going to chuck dice at each other, and that's going to be it. These melee cards, you're like having a full-scale combat with these cards where you say, oh, I'll play falling swing. Oh, I'll do low guard. And based on the cards that you play, you'll read the card and it'll show hey, if your opponent plays this card, this is what happens. You deal this much damage and you take this much damage. So you're constantly dealing and taking damage in combat. You're both damaging one another simultaneously. But there's strategic things you can do with these cards to be able to get crits. Like if you end up getting lucky and get 2 of the same named card in your hand draw, then you can double down and do a crit and double up on your damage. There's also ways where if you play a card that has a little yellow mark on it, and I'm not going to go into all these, we'll do more of that in the gameplay videos. If it has a little yellow mark on it, you get to attack again for free. Every character also has a signature move, which is printed right on their card, and it's only for melee. So if you get the same card that's printed on their card, their signature move, if you want, you can flip this card, the character card, over, and it's got their signature move stats on the back, which generally will do more damage, or it won't do any damage, but it'll give the character some cool ability or some thing that happens in what's called the end step, which is just the end of combat. Like you might get to run away, or you might get to push the model, or something like that. That happens. You get this signature move. So that's how all the melee works, and it really works out very, very cool mechanically because, again, remember where I said you could save some of that energy. This is where that would come in. Like if you got attacked and you still had energy, even if you already took your turn, or if you haven't yet for that model, then you could use some of that energy to maybe step an inch out of melee range, where now they can't hit you. So they might have to spend another one of their energies to move up closer again. And you may say, okay, that's fine, I'm out of energy, but at least I took one of your attacks away. Because what you don't want happening is a model being positioned, an enemy model coming in on it, and then being something where they have a 2-inch melee and you only have an inch, which means they can hit you and you can't. You can still defend, but you can't attack them. And then they have 3 energy left, and they're just like, attack, 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 and then your character's dead because they just did 3 attacks in a row. So that's where you really want to balance save some energy to be able to jump and move out of the way or react to your enemy when they come in for an attack. And it's so fun how it plays out, and you feel like that melee combat is like a sword fight where you're thrusting and blocking and slashing, and then your character and your opponent is trying to either guard or do attacks against you as well. And that is a very unique mechanic in a game like this. I think both of the melee as well as the range are very unique mechanics in this game, and they both play out completely different. Where if you do play a lot of these games, you're probably used to, well, it doesn't matter if it's a melee attack or a ranged attack. I look at my thing, I pick up that many dice. Okay, I roll. Do I hit your armor? Yes. Okay, do I hit this? Yes. Okay, now can I actually hit? Yes, I hit. Okay, how much damage do I do? Okay, I do that much damage. That's generally what you're doing, where this offers up a completely different gameplay experience and mechanic that is still with this style of game. And then, you layer on the small footprint, you layer on the awesome artwork, you layer on the models. It just, everything hits perfectly for this game, and it is a ton of fun. I cannot stop playing this game. It is definitely my favorite game right now. MoonStone, folks, you want to check it out. I'll end with, they do have a couple books that are out. Again, you're going to get all the rules there, but you will get the flavor text, the story. I highly recommend it. The books are coming at a pretty low cost. I think the MSRP on these were like $33. That's what I paid for them. I will also say I paid for everything that you see on the table. None of this was sent for review. There may be things in the future that are sent for a review. We'll see. But this was all purchased. I purchased all of this. I'll be purchasing some more models as well. And I purchased these books because there's only 2 books that are out. I got both books generally for the price of what you would pay for one book in most other games. They're not huge, but they're decent. They're decent size, and they're really nice, really high quality printing and books. And they got all the flavor text, and they got the scenario play in them, which is really awesome. You can set up those scenario plays. Or you can just set up any scenario you want and just play the game. That's completely up to you. You don't need the books, but definitely if you've got a little bit of extra cash and you want to add the books on top of your starter set, this is essentially the book that comes with one of the starter sets, the one that I have, and this is the book that really is probably more for that other starter set that's out. But you don't have to do that. You can get either book. But I do recommend picking up a book if you're going to get a starter set, just for that extra flavor and extra story. It'll add a lot more fun to your games. Team, that's all we're going to say today in this video. Again, MoonStone by Goblin King Games. You can pick up the game, obviously, directly from them. That's probably going to be your best price. This game is pretty much priced the same way everywhere you can find it. So you can get the game from them. You can also get the game from another place here, Phalanx Games and Sundry. This is really who I did some demos with at a local con. I had a great time. They also sell the game. They've got a website. You can go to it. I'll put the links to both at the bottom of the video here. You can go to the description and get the links to either going directly to Goblin King's Games or this site here. Same prices. I believe the prices are identical. And you can get yourself a starter set and just start there, right? Maybe just pick up one of the starter sets. I will say the starter set that I have is a little cheaper than the other starter. They do have different prices, but this first one is a little bit cheaper. I just like the models better in it anyway, right out of the gate, so that's the one that I went with. With that, team, keep rolling them crits. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time.